34 seconds. That's all it took. 1/2 minute of fire, and the largest machine ever built by human hands was gone. A flying palace, longer than 3 Boeing 747s parked nose to tail, reduced to a twisted skeleton on the ground. The Hindenburg was the pinnacle of its age, a luxury airliner that crossed the Atlantic in half the time of an ocean liner, with a lounge, a bar, and soundproofed cabins. It was supposed to be the future of travel. Instead, it became the future's gravestone. But here's the unsettling part. By every measure, the Hindenburg was a triumph. It had already completed a full season of flawless passenger flights. It was the safest way to cross the ocean, until it wasn't. On May 6, 1937, at Lakehurst Naval Air Station, the cameras were rolling. A radio announcer was live on air. The world watched as 35 people died in 34 seconds. And then the airship industry died with them. Why? How did a single brief fire erase decades of progress? The answer isn't what you think. It wasn't the fire itself, it was the hydrogen, it was the cameras, it was the timing, and it was a choice made years before the first flame ever appeared. This is the story of 34 seconds that ended an empire, and the surprising reason it never came back. Imagine crossing the Atlantic in a floating palace. You sip coffee in a grand lounge, the ocean a mile below. The year is 1936, and you are aboard the Hindenburg, the largest airship ever created. It is the crown jewel of a 30-year era where Zeppelins ruled the skies, carrying tens of thousands of passengers in luxury. These giants were not just transportation, they were symbols of human ambition, gliding silently over continents and oceans. But this was no ordinary aircraft. The Hindenburg was a flying hotel, with a dining room, a bar, and even a lightweight piano. Passengers dressed for dinner. They walked on promenade decks, watching the world unfold beneath them. Airships offered speed and comfort unmatched by ocean liners, and they promised a future where travel was effortless and elegant. Yet for all its majesty, the Hindenburg carried a hidden danger. Its massive envelope was filled with hydrogen, highly flammable, lighter than air, but volatile. Engineers had wanted to use helium, but politics and supply shortages forced a compromise. That choice would prove fatal. What made this airship so revolutionary and so vulnerable? To lift a palace of steel and fabric into the sky, you need a gas lighter than air. Helium was the safe choice, non-flammable, inert. But the United States held the world's supply and refused to sell it to Nazi Germany. Therefore, the Hindenburg was filled with hydrogen, 14 million cubic feet of the most explosive gas on Earth. Hydrogen is invisible, odorless, and utterly unforgiving. A single spark can turn it into a wall of fire. The Hindenburg's designers knew this. They coated the fabric with a fire-retardant dope, installed grounding wires, banned smoking, and even forced passengers to hand over matches. Yet the airship was still a flying bomb, just one that had never been tested. On May 6, 1937, that test arrived. The Hindenburg approached Lakehurst Naval Air Station in a thunderstorm. Static electricity crackled through the air. The crew dropped the mooring lines, wet ropes that conducted the sky's charge straight into the hull. A spark jumped. In less than a minute, the hydrogen ignited, and the largest airship ever built became a funeral pyre. 35 people died in the disaster. But the real casualty was an entire industry. How did a routine landing procedure go catastrophically wrong? Subscribe for more untold stories that shaped our world. The date is May 6, 1937. You are standing on the tarmac at Lakehurst Naval Air Station, New Jersey. The Hindenburg drifts in, a silver leviathan longer than 3 football fields. Newsreel cameras whir. A radio reporter, Herbert Morrison, speaks into his microphone. It's practically standing still now. Then, at 7:25 p.m., a spark, a tongue of flame licks the tail. In 34 seconds, the entire airship is a skeleton of burning steel. Morrison's voice breaks. Oh, the humanity. The cameras never stop rolling. The footage hits theaters within days. Millions watch the inferno unfold again and again. The death toll is staggering. But the real casualty is trust. You see a luxury liner turn into a fireball in half a minute. You never board an airship again, therefore the industry collapses overnight. The Hindenburg was the largest airship ever built, the pride of Nazi Germany. Yet one fire, 1/2 minute of film, erases decades of engineering. Airlines cancel orders, governments ground fleets. The future of transatlantic travel shifts from the sky to the sea, and soon to the wing. But why did this one fire have such an outsized impact? Experts still debate whether the disaster was a freak accident or the result of fatal design flaws. To understand the Hindenburg disaster, you have to look past the surface. The same pattern shows up again and again, and its effects compound the longer it runs. Could airships have survived if not for this moment? The newsreel cameras kept rolling, the radio reporter kept speaking, but the world stopped listening to the promise of airships. In 34 seconds, the Hindenburg, the largest flying object ever built, became a torch. 35 people died. That number alone didn't end the industry. What did was the image. A luxury liner dissolving into a fireball, captured live, replayed endlessly. Trust doesn't just crack under that kind of heat, it vaporizes. Before that evening, the Zeppelin was the future. It crossed oceans in luxury, silent and smooth, outpacing ocean liners. Airlines were still small, noisy, and unreliable. But the Hindenburg's hydrogen, cheap and lift efficient, was also a bomb waiting for a spark. The spark came, and the public saw it. Therefore, the age of the airship ended not with a whimper, but with a single, unforgettable ignition. Governments cancelled contracts, investors fled. The remaining Zeppelins were scrapped or turned into museum pieces. Meanwhile, the airplane industry, already developing pressurized cabins and longer ranges, seized the moment. The future of transatlantic travel shifted from floating to flying. What replaced the airship empire, and why? The Hindenburg's ghost still haunts the sky. Every time you board a plane, you trust a system that learned from that fire. But the lesson wasn't about hydrogen, it was about perception. The newsreel footage burned the image into the public mind. A giant falling torch, 35 people dead, enough to fill a small school bus. That single half-minute erased decades of engineering triumph. No one remembered the years of safe crossings, they remembered the flame. Therefore, the airship industry collapsed overnight. The great floating palaces were scrapped. The technology that could have evolved into a transatlantic network of luxury travel vanished. Yet the dream never fully died. Today, engineers are quietly building a new generation of airships, not for passengers, but for cargo. They use helium, not hydrogen. They fly low and slow, burning far less fuel than a truck. But the stigma remains. Investors hesitate. Regulators demand proof. The Hindenburg's legacy is a cautionary tale about the fragility of progress. One disaster, perfectly captured, can kill an entire industry. But the physics of lighter-than-air flight still works. The question is whether the public will ever let it rise again. Could airships ever make a comeback? Because the fire was filmed. It is 7:25 p.m. on May 6, 1937. The Hindenburg, the largest airship ever built, drifts toward the mooring mast at Lakehurst, New Jersey. Then, a spark. In 34 seconds, the hydrogen-filled giant is a skeleton of flame. 35 people die. But the real death is not of people, it is of an industry. The lesson is brutal. A technology's reputation can be destroyed in a single visible failure, no matter how safe it was before. The Hindenburg had flown safely for years. Yet one disaster, captured by newsreel cameras and broadcast on live radio, seared the image of exploding airships into the public mind forever. The airship empire did not die from a slow decline. It died in 34 seconds. That same pattern, a sudden, spectacular collapse that erases a once dominant industry, will appear again. But next time, the monopoly is hidden in plain sight, and the failure is not fire, but something far quieter. This is the Monopoly Matrix, where history meets hard data.